Hello again. Thanks for joining me. Subscribe, please. I appreciate it. Get that out of the way. All right. So, it's Halloween. Mid-Missouri here, and the leaves are littering the ground and crunching under feet. The smell of burning yard waste, as they call it. It's a wonderful time. The leaves in the trees are brilliant yellows and reds. Gorgeous, gorgeous out. And campfire in my backyard is not so much roaring, yeah, anymore. It's getting darker. I'm superimposed on it, so I'm not sitting out in my backyard at the moment. But it's dark. It's getting creepier. It's the perfect time for campfire stories. But I'm not going to tell you a story. Because stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But none of the things that I talk about in this channel have any kind of discernible beginning. They just seem to be. Almost none of them have any kind of an end. They just are. So I'm not going to tell you a story. But I will tell you about a few creatures. What they are and how they work, perhaps. But mostly what they look like and what people have seen. So, what should we start with? Well, we have a lot of different possibilities. I have over 600 different options just in the United States itself, and growing. It's always more and more stories to tell and things for me to learn from and to share with you. So let's talk about something that is actually near and dear to this location. Missouri has several different monsters. Most famous, most likely, is MOMO. Not the MOMO from social media that happened a couple of years ago or whatever. No, not the creepy bird sculpture that came from a Japanese artist who was quite fantastic, by the way. No, MOMO was basically another Bigfoot. Discovered or seen, sighted, whatever. A little ways north of St. Louis, Missouri. Pretty easy to find. And it's in a little bitty town. And this Bigfoot is unique in a few different ways. One, it was seen in a relatively small area of the town. There's a forest kind of inside and at the side-ish of the town that is not very large, but yet this large creature was sighted in that area and around several times throughout a few years. And even periodically, we still get more reports decades later. This originally started in the 70s. My campfire finally went out. But it's just going to get darker is all. But it was originally seen back in the 70s. But one of the things that makes it unusual is that it seemed to have a really large, almost pumpkin-like head with big, long, shaggy fur going down across its face. This is an unusual thing for Bigfoot reports. I have read a lot of Bigfoot reports. In fact, if I never read another Bigfoot report in my life, it'll still be too soon. Yeah, but this one was an interesting one. It was not terribly aggressive, as far as I can tell. It was, however, large and shaggy, and your typical Bigfoot otherwise. Your Bigfoot reports are something relatively new, I might add. Something that really just kind of happened a few decades ago in the mid-1900s. It was something that didn't exist before that. The Bigfoot craze was invented about that time, and it's basically an abstraction of folklore that existed beforehand. A lot of people love to point to all of the wildman reports from the 1800s, especially, and early 1900s to some degree. But these are very commonly, easily explained away as, people that were living at the fringes of society, and very frequently, to be completely honest, very frequently very racist things against Native Americans. But some are quite unusual and hard to explain. So it's possible that people were seeing something unusual, but highly unlikely. A lot of people really like to point to the Native American tales of large, hairy people. This is a problem too, though. One of the big problems with this is that whenever hairy pops up, it usually is referring to people with longer hair, not meaning that they had fur all over their bodies or anything like that. It's a linguistic translation problem, and it's almost impossible to nail down how many of those tales have anything to do with unusual hominids that weren't human. A lot of them, the Native American tales, talk about very dramatically strong, large, and powerful people, but that's exactly what they are people, not some animal that looks kind of like a person, like your modern concept of Bigfoot. Still, there are a few that do fit that kind of Bigfoot mold, as people like to imagine a Bigfoot to be these days. Quite frankly, the ones that are most commonly cited as the beginnings of the Sasquatch and Bigfoot things come from the Pacific Northwest, and from a specific group of tales that are talking about a specific group of people. And yes, people, because they were talking about basically a tribe of people, another tribe of Native Americans that lived just a little ways away from the natives that were telling the story. And they wore clothing, they used tools, they even spoke the same language. So it's pretty obvious we're not talking about some sort of, monstrous humanoid thing. No, that's not at all what that was. But, like I said, there are a handful of stories that aren't so clearly regular humans, just abstracted into tales. Another one, since we're on the Bigfoot, there's a military base in the center of the state here that had a Bigfoot report on the base itself. Now, this is a large military base, geographically speaking, not so much for population, but there is a lot of natural land that's part of the base, and it's not all made civilized, if you will. It's not built up. It's not all base as you might imagine a military base to be. There's a lot of wild woodlands out there, but they still have to keep it secure as best as possible. So you have a lot of patrols that go out, and they have to do some training out there and things like that. And it's a great place for that kind of thing. But one of the one of the military individuals had an unusual tale to tell when they came back from their station at one point. And it turned out to be a very, as we've come to expect, typical Bigfoot report. So, on a personal side note on that one, though, I have to say it's absolutely hilarious, because somebody I work with was married to a man who was camping in that exact same area, and he's a very large, hairy man. So we like to joke about the fact that he was mistaken for Bigfoot. But that's the key to a lot of these things. A lot of mistaken identities happen in folk tales and especially cryptozoology. But it's impossible to really say what is and isn't a real monstrous thing, or what is just a product of fear-induced surprise to run across an animal or a bear that stands up in the middle of the woods or something like that, and what actually might be something that nobody knows anything about. It's almost impossible. And that's pretty magical. There's something really interesting about how desperately we want to believe that the world is full of big, scary things, that by all logic and all reason, there should be no way for these things to possibly fly under the radar, so to speak. We still want to believe that they're out there. And there could be quite a few things. Cryptozoology loves to talk about the squid that we found after a whole lot of reports for quite a long time, but no documentable evidence had ever come from the giant squid. But we finally did discover it and record it well enough to document this as a real thing. The oceans are full of all sorts of really crazy things that nobody's ever been able to see before. Sometimes we see some really bizarre things. But I'll let it stop here for now. I've probably bored you, and this is not at all what I had in mind for the channel, other than boring watching me make artwork. And I'll be posting those pretty soon too. But for now, I'm going to cut this one off, and then I'll make another video talking about some more. And it just cut off for no reason. You heard that beep? I don't know what that was. I'll see you for